Alright, a while back I made a video talking about the different pieces of gear that I use to rig up my FX30, and in that one I briefly mentioned that it's very rare for me to have all of the stuff on the camera at the same time, and instead what I do is I just put things on depending on the situation. So in this one I want to go over a few of the FX30 rigs that I put together and give you sort of a breakdown of why and when I use each of them, and maybe give you some ideas for your own setup. Everything I talk about will be linked in the description, and you can also check out the more detailed rig video that I made before if you want to know why I picked up these specific parts. So we're going to start off with the most simple setup, and this one is going to be the starting point for all of the other ones after it, and it's honestly the way that I've been trying to use my FX30 as often as possible nowadays. I obviously start out with the Sony FX30 with a lens on it, and the lens is going to depend on what I'm going to be shooting, and I've got another video talking about my go-to lenses for this camera, so you can go and check that out if you're interested. But like 90% of the time, I'll just have the Tamron 17-70 on here. Then on the front of that, I usually put on a magnetic filter base ring that I can then use to attach my absolute favorite ND/polarizer filter, which is the V2 from Freewell. And because it's magnetic, I can work with it really quickly and easily and use it only whenever I need to. Now, going back to the camera for a second, I've also got a small rig cage for the FX30, and it makes it easier to rig it out more whenever I need to, and it comes with a NATO rail for the top of the camera. But lately, I've actually realized that I don't want to have it on all the time, because the only reason I need it is when I'm going to be using handles with the camera. And if I'm going to be using handles, I'll usually know about it beforehand because I'll plan for it. But the rest of the time, I just like having access to my hot shoe, either to have a little cover with a bubble level on it, which has been a lot more useful than I initially expected, or I just put my on-camera microphone on there. Speaking of the microphone, it is the exact same one that you've been listening to so far in this video, and it is the exact same one that I've been using for like 3 years now, I think, but it's been so long that I'm not even sure, and it is the Movo VXR10 Pro. It is just an insanely good microphone for $50, and I have used it for personal stuff, I have used it for client projects, and I have never had anyone complain about the sound coming out of it. And this is what the first rig, if you can even call it that, looks like. Like I said, this is what I try to run most of the time because it is just so easy and quick to put together. It doesn't get in my way, but I still have everything I need covered to be able to get good looking images and good sounding audio. And I have mentioned this before, but one of my favorite things about the FX30 is that you actually need very little on it to be able to get great results from it, and this is pretty much all I need most of the time. I can put this on a gimbal, I can put it on a slider, I can run it handheld, and it just works. That said, the reason I even put together other rigs is because sometimes some of the other accessories I use just offer a little bit more convenience for certain specific situations, which I'll talk about in a second. But first, it is with a heavy heart that I have to admit, sometimes I have to use my FX30 to film vertical content. I'm as disappointed as you are, but unfortunately we live in a time where people want stuff for socials, and social media just likes vertical stuff. That's why I also have a vertical rig for my FX30 that I use sometimes. Now, for the most part, it's essentially the exact same as the first one, but for this one, I actually put on the NATO rail on the top of the camera because I like using a specific handle when I shoot vertical. And it's a handle from a company called Nitsy, and it's got a small rig rotating adapter on it. And this is something that I picked up to use it as a side handle whenever I'm shooting horizontal, but lately I've actually been leaving it off most of the time because I realized that it throws off the balance of my bigger camera rig that I'll talk about a bit later. However, I do find it very useful when I'm shooting vertically because when the camera is sideways, I obviously can't hold the camera grip, and it makes it much more awkward to work with, but with this handle, I have a much nicer point of contact, and it also gives me a spot to put my microphone whenever I need it. Again, luckily, I don't need to shoot vertical that often. Most of my work is horizontal, but whenever my luck runs out and someone asks for vertical footage, this setup makes me hate my life just a little bit less. Alright, going back to another kind of horizontal setup, but not exactly, and you'll see what I mean in a second. And again, it is almost the exact same as the first one, but instead of having a bubble level or a microphone microphone on the hot shoe, I use a little phone clamp that has a cold shoe adapter on it, and I put that right on top of my FX30. And then I put my iPhone on that, and I turn it so that the phone is vertical, and I just move the microphone over to the cold shoe that's on the side of the cage if I need to even have it on. Now, this is a setup that I sometimes use when I need to get both horizontal and vertical footage of the same things, or almost the same things that are happening. And the way I'll do it is I'll only shoot horizontal with the FX30, but I'll have the Blackmagic camera app open on my phone, and whenever I need to, I can just quickly reach over and hit record on the phone to get some vertical stuff as well. And I used this setup a few months back when we were shooting a music video for a local artist, where I was just helping out with whatever I could because it was a 4-person crew, but I was also trying to get some behind the scenes. And I decided to do it this way because it was much easier to get stuff that would potentially work for a behind the scenes video on YouTube, but also stuff that could be used for stories or Instagram or whatever. And it was much quicker to just have my phone on top of the camera ready to go instead of having to take it out of my pocket, hitting record, getting a clip, then putting it back in my pocket, then taking it out again and doing that over and over again, and potentially missing out on stuff that would be cool to have in a behind the scenes. Now, when I'm running this setup, I obviously don't always record horizontal and vertical at the same time because the framing isn't always going to look the same. But like I said, for BTS projects, which I do fairly often at this point, it's just something that makes the whole workflow a lot more convenient. I do want to mention that the phone clamp I got isn't the best, and I'll try to find a link for a better one to leave in the description if you're also looking for one, but for now, even this cheap one gets the job done, so I guess it's fine, but eventually I will probably upgrade it. Alright, and finally, the big boy. Now, this is the rig that I try to stay away from whenever possible because it is the biggest, it is the heaviest, and it takes the most time to put it together and make sure that nothing is getting in the way of something else. But at the same time, for certain projects, there are bits and pieces of it that just make the most sense for what I'm trying to do. So again, starting with the first one as the base, and then I put the NATO rail on top of the camera. On top of that, I put a top handle from SmallRig that gives me more ways to hold the camera, especially when I'm going to be shooting low angles. And then on the front of that, I've got a quick release monitor mount, and on that, I put my monitor. And the monitor itself is from FieldWorld, and I've been using it for ages, but it's not the most premium thing in the world. It gets the job done, but it's like not very impressive. But in some situations, having it on is just a lot more convenient than having to rely on the small screen on the FX30. For some projects, I don't really have a lot of room for mistakes, so I need to be able to see what I'm doing and what my image looks like on a nice, big, bright screen to make sure that everything looks right. And it's also pretty useful when a client or someone I'm shooting with wants to see what we're doing, and I can just pull up a clip on the big monitor. And then on the back of the monitor, I've got something that I only recently picked up. And I'm not one to use the word game changer to hype something up, but if you're someone who's using an external monitor with your camera, this is a game changer. And it is just a simple NPF 550 style dummy battery that then has a D-tap cable coming out of it that I can plug into my external battery, which I'll get to in a second. Before this thing, I used to use these big NPF 970 style batteries, which are the big heavy boys. And they're great for power, but they are awful for ergonomics and for weight. And when I was still using them, there would be times when I would make like a quicker move with my camera and the monitor would shift out of position and I would have to readjust it, and that just started getting really annoying. But with the dummy battery, you don't even feel it at all, and the monitor stays where it should and doesn't move unless I want it to move. And just the way that it impacts the balance of the overall camera package is crazy underrated. So if I could go back and tell my old self what he should get for his camera rig, then this thing would be damn near on top of the list. And if you're still using separate batteries for your external monitor, I really recommend considering picking up a dummy battery as long as you also have an external power solution that you can plug it into. Speaking of which, I also put on a quick release battery plate on the bottom of my FX30, and then my SmallRig V-mount battery goes on the back of that. Then I'll have a USB-C to USB-C cable coming out of the V-mount and into the camera. Then I also plug in the D-tap cable for the monitor into the side of the V-mount. And finally, I plug in the HDMI from the monitor into the camera. And as far as when and why I use this rig, I mostly use it when I'm working on client projects. Sometimes I will use it for personal stuff, but it needs to be a very specific personal project for something like this to make sense over one of the other setups that I talked about. And I'll use it when I know that most of the stuff I'm going to be shooting is either going to be on a tripod or on my DIY camera saddle that I've got a video about, or it's going to be handheld, but only for like short periods of time, because this thing isn't like absurdly heavy, but it is still heavy, and I'm more than fine carrying it around for a long time, but I just don't want to. Like, it's not very comfortable, and it's something that I try to avoid whenever I can. But in some cases, the weight is also a good thing, because you've probably heard people saying that if you want your handheld footage to be smoother, you gotta make sure that your camera package is heavier, and this definitely does that. So yeah, those are the different setups that I currently use with my Sony FX30, and I'm hoping I was able to give you some ideas about your own setups. And you can go ahead and drop me a comment and let me know if you found this helpful, or if you got any questions. But that is it from me, and I will see you in the next one.